Hello, and welcome to the Graeyzone. My name is Silas.
My name is Raouf.
My name's Christian, and today we don't have Rob with us.
No, we do not, unfortunately.
He's off driving Lamborghinis?
Yes, he's driving Lamborghinis today, the lucky bastard.
He doesn't have one in his garage, however, which means he doesn't have a lot of knowledge.
I know. Like, we don't have bookcases in there either. Alright, what we are talking about today is the question of what caliber of media should be analyzed. Specifically, like, should we go into depth on some of these different TV shows, movies, whatever? And I wanted to start out by asking you guys, if an English teacher came up to you and asked you to analyze one show, what show would you analyze? What show would you not want to analyze? Raouf?
So, I think I have a slightly different perspective from you guys, because I do have a degree in screen studies.
Okay, yes,
so
you do.
For me, if you were to put any show in front of me, I can do my damnedest to analyze it. Would I want to?
Or enjoy it.
Enjoy it?
Well, the thing is that you can analyze everything, right?
Yes.
So you can analyze literally any show, and people have done that. Like, Dora.
Yes.
You can analyze Dora if you want to.
But is there, I guess more so the more concise idea is there merit in analyzing and reanalyzing something like Dora? Or once you watch it and you've made a decision on it, should you really be going back and breaking down Swiper's character arc?
So I think part of it is how you choose to approach the analysis. I know I'm belaboring the question, but just to explain.
It's okay, that's your degree in action.
Would I fucking analyze Dora the Explorer for its complex characters and deep societal issues? No. I might write, okay, here's how I'll put it to you. I might write, a 2-page
dissertation on it?
Dissertation maybe about, what does it mean that one of the most popular children's icons is actually a Hispanic girl?
Or what are the effects of the show on children?
On children.
That's a different situation.
It could be what is it theoretically teaching these kids? And again, what does it mean that these kids are actively consuming the show that prominently features a Hispanic girl as the lead character? Would I write a 10-page paper about Dora the Explorer?
You could
Probably not.
Probably not. As somebody that isn't in the field of children's studies, somebody in the field of children's studies might, but that is much more niche. But I guess what we're talking about here is from a general audience to an intellectual audience, but not in specific fields.
Yes. As a critic of media, essentially. Mm-hmm. I would write a 2-page paper about Dora, maybe. But what would I write a 10-page paper on?
Yes.
Would I even touch something like Evangelion for a 10-page paper?
You could probably source material, so many different examples of dissertations on Neon Genesis Evangelion.
I mean, as we know, there are dudes in Japan who write their fucking master's thesis about Evangelion. No, it's true, by the way.
No, on the other hand, though, not to get too obscure, but there is a show that came out around the same time as Neon Genesis Evangelion called Serial Experiments Lain, and Serial Experiments Lain does not get as much analysis because it is not as popular and has been forgotten about. So, there's that facet of this too, of some things are overanalyzed because there are so many eyes on it. Do we really need to break down
Evangelion?
But I was going to say Captain America or Endgame or something like that. I mean, we probably don't. Somebody's probably already done it.
I'm sure I could go on YouTube right now.
But do they need to do that? You can watch the movie and you can talk about it with your friends, but it doesn't have as much maybe practical merit in doing so.
I agree with that. I don't think that it's worth breaking down, a character like Iron Man or what's another popular media I haven't watched too much of it, but I guess even Doctor Who. Now I know that Doctor Who might have a lot of different, because there's different doctors, right? So there's a lot of different personalities.
And it has been running for over 50 years at this point, almost 60 years.
But no, that's a bad example. I actually think, now that I think about it, that Doctor Who is actually something that you can break down pretty good.
You can, and
analyze it pretty
and
well.
part of that is because there are so many different writers on there that if we were to ask the question, should we analyze media? The answer is yes, because you're going to find something in the box.
Yes.
You're going to find something in the police box, which is Doctor Who, that you can analyze. Even if there are episodes which are crap and are meritless, there's going to be something else there. Also, it was originally designed as a show for children to teach them about different sciences and things like that in the 1960s. That's actually the original intent of the show.
And
is
presumably history, too.
It was history. That's a time-traveling doctor who has to explore these things.
A time-traveling doctor. All right? What a perfect way to exemplify both science and history.
Right, time-traveling doctor who was like, these are dinosaurs. And in the 1960s, television was still relatively new. So there is merit.
That's true. It did come out way long
1963.
ago. Jeez, man. But so going back on what I was saying, it is worth analyzing characters that have a huge history, somewhat pun intended, with the Doctor. But it's not worth analyzing, I don't know,
Yamcha?
Goku from Dragon Ball Z. You know, he's pretty much a single-faceted character, and his entire goal is to defend, the people he likes.
Oh, but is that his goal? See,
no.
Already you have a wrinkle.
Already, but
he just wants to fight the toughest person in the universe. He wants to win.
On the flip side,
No, he doesn't actually want to win.
He just wants to fight them.
He just wants to fight them. That's
on
right.
the flip side of this argument, you could say that the reason why you would analyze things is not because of the sake of like analyzing it, breaking it down, and understanding, okay, this is this person's character arc and things like that. Sometimes you do analyze things because something is so popular, specifically to understand why it's so popular, to understand why it resonates with people. And that is the inverse to what we're talking about.
Yeah, and you would also, sometimes I would want to analyze things just to figure out, what was the intent of the author by creating such a character?
Mm-hmm. So, in the case of, we'll go with more modern than DBC, but My Hero Academia, that show has a resonation with, at least I believe the moral of that is do your best and always try to do your best.
Which is not a new
work
trope.
hard. It's not a new trope, but it's presented in a way that can inspire people. Now, that is practical art in my book. That is something, you watch My Hero and you get up and you're like, I want to get something done today.
Yeah.
It gives you that.
Work out.
I'm going to go work out. I'm going to go work on my paper. I'm going to go make sure that my card's in tip-top shape because, I can do this. And it has such a wide amount of characters that you can find somebody to relate to, and the energy of the show still kind of resonates with people. Now, with that in mind, you can go to something like...
Actually, before you move to the next example, this is... My Hero represents an interesting case, in a way. Actually, maybe not that interesting a case, but it's an example of okay, this is what I mean by you can approach things in certain ways and try to twist them to mean certain things. Or even not even twist them that much. Like I said, I could write a 2-3 page essay about Dora the Explorer. With My Hero, you could be like, what does it mean that this is a society that have, so prominently focuses on genetics? You have a whole arc with the dad, Todoroki's dad, who's like, I need these specific genetics within my son. You could try to spin off that idea.
You can, and that's because it's well written and there's a lot of facets to it, right?
Yeah,
it's not a smooth wall, it's a very bumpy wall that you can feel things on.
It's a cascade of different characters, and I actually like My Hero for that, interesting aspect. Now again, not a new trope by any means, not a novel case, right? We've seen other shows that have multiple characters.
That in particular hasn't been a novel case since the 1940s, I'd say.
No, not even. But
the genetics part, at least.
That's what I meant. But
okay, so My Hero versus Avengers. Okay. My Hero, of course, has 4.5 seasons right now, and they divulge into many of the different characters' lives and struggles, as do the Avengers, right?
You're talking the whole Marvel franchise?
I'm kind of talking the whole Marvel franchise, because it's not just one movie, it's multiple movies, right?
Fuck ton of movies.
23 and counting.
Yes.
My question is that why do we feel that we need to analyze characters like Iron Man or Deku or Captain America or Todoroki. They represent different ideas of characters, and they have these in multiple different forms of media.
Main characters, just across the board, main characters in things which are designed to resonate with a lot of people generally represent an ideal and virtuous cultural value and something that the culture likes and the culture wishes to aspire to. Mm-hmm. Things which are designed for a more niche audience will seem to... Sometimes they are just designed to resonate with the niche audience, and sometimes that resonating with the niche audience doesn't actually mean that they relate to them, but it makes them think because that's what that niche audience wants, right?
Right. So my question then off of that is, do general ideals that people want to aspire to need to be analyzed in the same way that niche ideas that are separate from society should be analyzed?
They can be easily analyzed. They can do a 2-page paper on Dora. But I think it is niche things which are analyzed more because somebody who is not part of the subculture does not understand what that's about, and so it actually requires, that caliber of media requires more analyzation because you're breaking it down and allowing somebody who does not know the jargon and the intent and feeling of that subculture to do it. And sometimes even within the subculture, that can be it if the subculture focuses around that. This might not be the case anymore because as subcultures continue to exist, the longer they do, the more drawn out things become, the more it becomes more culturally relevant and people understand it. Yeah. But the case of cyberpunk, if you were to get into cyberpunk in 1970, whenever Dick Clark wrote his novels, I think that was late 70s, early 80s, into the 90s, that's still like a very niche subculture. But now...
The most anticipated game of 2020 is literally called Cyberpunk.
And it's going to come out the day that the year that it's supposedly made for, 2077.
With that in mind, you have something like Cyberpunk, and I bet a lot of people don't really know why it was created originally, but nerds do. Like people who are invested in kind of that overall, the general nerd culture understand what Cyberpunk is for the most part.
Mm-hmm. I think you touch on something I was about to say, which is, there are some things that need to constantly be reintroduced to people who don't know their history and are like, oh, what is it? I promise you, there's going to be a 5-hour fucking analysis about Cyberpunk 2077, maybe a month after it comes out.
And they're going to bring up books by Dick Clark and be like, so this history.
But some people might not... Yes, that the person making it.
Yes,
will
the person
do
making
that.
it will reference it.
The people listening to it are going to be like,
"Wow,
oh, I've never heard of such a thing."
And it's because, and part of that is the cyclical nature of certain subcultures.
Yes.
It's like in 2000 through 2005, if you asked somebody what did punk mean, they could probably give you a pretty concise answer because it was culturally relevant at the time. But nowadays, if you ask that, unless you're asking somebody who is very into that culture, it's very ambiguous.
So,
because Green Day was popular between... sorry to anybody out there that might be offended by that, but as a pop-punk band, Green Day was popular between 2000 and 2005.
With someone wearing a Susie and the Banshees shirt, Christian, I feel like you're a little bit of punk culture.
No, yes. What I meant was, there was a thing for any listeners out there.
But even with the Marvel films that you mentioned, Silas, someone's going to look at, Captain America's archetype and wow, let's fucking break this down for 2 hours. The archetype patriot, has some conflicted feelings about his country, but
wants to do right and be righteous.
That archetype has existed in media
since the Greek times.
Since media has existed.
Right. So
but people fucking fell asleep during language arts class, didn't care, but now that it's on the big screen with $200 million behind it, they're like, let us fucking take a look at this.
But then also there are people who were never invested in art to begin with, or in media to begin with, and then there are people who are just young. young people who are being introduced to these for the
Exposed
very
to these
first
new
time.
archetypes. So then, I guess then it kind of leads me to think that you do need to analyze all these different facets of media. You know, you need your Captain Americas. You need your sad boy Todorokis. You need your Zuko's. You know, you need. I love Zuko's arc as a redemptive, like, anti-hero from the Avatar.
That's a great fucking example because it shows you, like, even a decade between the existence of Zuko and the existence of Todoroki, people already have these analyses of Todoroki as if it's like,
New.
what an interesting fucking character dynamic.
And what's very interesting, if we're going to talk about the caliber of media, is I think a lot of these constant analyses of things are because we haven't yet got to the caliber of media, or we have some examples, I'll bring those up in a moment, but that stick for long enough that people know about them without having to dig.
Well, I would have to argue that.
Well, Greek examples,
I was
there
gonna say
are
that.
Greek examples,
Yes.
right? But in a mainstream American culture, I actually think that probably the only one that really has been existent for a long time would be Star Wars at this point.
Yeah, I was gonna
Star
say
Wars.
Luke Skywalker
Luke
is very much the
Skywalker.
archetypical,
And
like,
most people
hero.
know about that. But on the other, and especially because of the internet, and that the internet has really been able to capture something like that. But when I was growing up in the early 2000s, I remember there are lots of kids I went to school with who didn't know anything about Star Wars, even though the prequels were coming out, because their parents were never invested in
maybe
them.
they were willfully ignorant.
Now, nowadays, because of the internet, you see it all the time, and it has become much more culturally relevant. So those characters like Luke Skywalker and Leia and Han Solo, they're all going to represent different aspects of American culture that are going to stick, and people are going to be able to easily reference.
Yeah, I think you're gonna be hard pressed to find that like 3-hour analysis of a Luke Skywalker, like hero of a thousand faces type hero on YouTube of like modern media, because like Silas, you were saying, that's something where you just don't need that anymore.
No,
like
I don't
Luke
think so.
Skywalker, that sort of hero has been so, as you're saying, Christian.
Saturated.
And because we
today's
are
media.
no longer in the time period of, if you wanted to watch something that was analysis, like a breakdown or documentary, you had to go to the library. You can get on YouTube, and it's permanently there unless somebody decides to take it down. That changes it, and now we have archives of these analyses. So do we actually need a lot of analyses for the general public on these things now? Do we need new things?
You know, I was just thinking about this with us still being in the epoch of like the internet media, not just the internet, because the internet's been around since '96. No, the media,
it's been a
publicly available.
publicly available to most people.
the social media and the accessibility to all people within a reasonable sense, right? You get a $50 phone and a plan, and you're good to go. With that, we're going to start seeing some of these archetypes not necessarily needing to be redone, and I think that it's gonna just start adding flavor to these characters, right? And I think that that's actually always been happening to a certain degree, but you know, with how fast things are gonna start going and how we have a source of information which is steadily available, I don't think that like having another Luke Skywalker is gonna be a novel idea. And I don't
Well, it's
think
not that the character can't exist. It's just that we don't need to sit here for 2 hours and be like, let's fucking
Now,
break this down to the bone marrow.
Only thing,
that's what I mean.
Now, the only thing then becomes it becomes less about the analysis and about who is doing the analysis at that point.
And
once
for
we
what
reach that.
audience.
And for what audience. Because I don't really understand why, because it's just not how my brain works. I mean, I can kind of understand it, but people will often, even if there's like, let's say a young person that has a good video, high quality, if it's 10 years later, even if that's still a high quality video and looks okay, people will find somebody new who's now producing content
Yeah.
to watch the same thing, and so that's going to become cyclical.
Yeah, I guess the what you're saying, Christian, is that it's going to be about who's your favorite person that's going to talk about this, and what are they saying about it?
See, thing is, you say that these archives are there forever, but the internet has a short memory. despite how easy it is to re-access information.
Yeah,
and
being in the internet culture is like you get 12 minutes and then something new.
And the thing is, like, with so many people being able to use the internet, like, let's say I made a fucking analysis of Final Fantasy X in the year 2010. By, like, 2013, my video's, like, out of YouTube's algorithm cycle, and some other guy's gonna produce a high-quality analysis, and they're gonna be like, wow, we've never seen this before. Like, bitch, my video had 2 million views. I mean, theoretically, like, hypothetically.
Right, no, I get what you're saying.
He doesn't have 2 million views yet.
Don't
let him fool you.
Let's get him to 2 million. Please.
Also, I didn't make a Final Fantasy X video in 2010.
Oh my goodness. Alright, so the next thing I kind of want to go into is not just the characters themselves, but like, actual games, or I say games like we were just talking about video games.
Right.
Or like general movies, like, we don't have to analyze the characters themselves, but like the entirety of the show itself, right? And whether such shows, like for example, Monk. All right, Monk's a great show from the early noughts. It's a detective, like, that solve crime. Every episode's a new crime, but then it's got a backstory. That, stereotypical crime show of the early noughties. Does a show like that deserve to be analyzed in the same way that maybe, I don't know, some
Silence of the Lambs.
Silence of the Lambs, or what's another TV show that has an ongoing premise instead of just like a episode to episode basis?
A serialized, like...
Serialized shows, yeah.
I
don't know.
I mean,
True Detective.
True Detective
is...
Mindhunter. No, does that? No.
I mean, that might exist. I don't know what it is.
Burn Notice. Burn Notice has an ongoing premise.
I mean,
even though it still has
ended.
I know it has, but no. What I'm saying is like, Burn Notice itself followed a storyline of a single character, and even though that person got into multiple different things.
Breaking Bad would probably be the better example here.
Thank you. Yes, Breaking Bad is definitely the better example.
Game of Thrones.
You're right.
Those like big shows.
Well, I brought up True Detective because Monk is also a detective show.
Yes.
Right. So do we need that same analysis that we give to Breaking Bad for shows like Monk or like Psych?
Ironically, and this is kind of the one of my conclusions is to determine if you need an analysis of a show, you kind of have to do at least some sort of an analysis of a show first.
That's true.
And that is the ironic aspect of this is so...
You still need to analyze it in a certain degree.
All calibers of shows need some sort of analysis, but what caliber show needs deeper, more intricate analyses that break it into pieces? Because Dora, Bob the Builder, and even Monk to some degree, although it does talk about mental illness, they are all more simplistic in nature, and they have certain messages, but they're not very deep.
Right.
On the other hand, you have shows like Breaking Bad that might have deep messages, and maybe it's greed corrupts, or it just might be for entertainment, but to actually come to that conclusion, because it is much more complex, you actually do need to do an analysis. And then if you come to the conclusion that, yes, it is worth, like, really going in depth, then you can do a secondary analysis and actually break things into pieces.
As I've said many times, you have to critique things, you have to start with your gut feeling of whatever you just watched or played or read, and then work backwards to explain that gut feeling, right? You're like, okay, I liked this game. Why did I like it? And then you do, as Christian said, that initial analysis. And my question is, okay, you've sort of completed your sort of self-analysis of why you like this, right? Then I have to question, like, okay, Mr. YouTube man, do you need your 4-hour critique of this fucking thing, like, populating the internet? Like, does that need to exist?
And, in some cases, it might, but then it's not as much practical as much as it is just entertainment.
Right. Well, I think we'll get to that a bit later, because I have a few things to say about the entertainment of watching critiques of entertainment.
So
but I'll put that to the side for now.
As of going on to video games, let's see. What's a really straightforward video game?
Super
SpongeBob
Mario
Battle
Brothers.
For...
I like how I went for the obvious one.
Super Mario Brothers. All right, let's go with that. Super Mario Brothers, very straightforward premise, right? Versus, I don't know, Dark Souls. Dark Souls, sure, it hasn't had enough analyses. Let's give it another one. Dark Souls, very bleak. It doesn't give you a lot of information. Typical From Software type of gameplay involves not knowing anything and then just going with it, right? Yeah. And yet so many people have broken down Dark Souls, right? Every single character, the intent of what you're doing and why you're doing it. Super Mario Bros. You don't really need that much of an analysis, do you?
With Dark Souls, you could make the argument about how we talked about how things constantly need to be reiterated, because instead of listening to analysis of Dark Souls, you could just listen to an analysis of Berserk.
Oh, shit. I will say, what differentiates video games from other media, of course, is the fact that you can play it,
You
right?
can do it, right. You have
to
that.
enjoy Breaking Bad, I mean, I guess you could enjoy some of the spectacle of it, but it's also a very slow show.
Right.
So if you don't understand, at least at some level, what's going on, then you can't really enjoy it that much, right?
Yes,
Right.
you can. You can enjoy it, but only from the capacity of, I'm going to talk about it with somebody else. So you have an active enjoyment. There are a lot of shows that I've watched specifically not because I enjoy the show, but because I want to talk about the show with another group of people. That happened a lot more in high school, where I wanted to talk about shows. Actually, this is embarrassing, but when I was 14, I didn't have a lot of friends, and I actually watched My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic because there was a large group of people at my school that all talked about it all the time, and I wanted to be able to fit in and to talk about the show with them, so I had some type of conversation.
Right, but to talk about the show, you have to at least get something about its premise, what these characters are.
But that doesn't mean you have to enjoy it.
Well, no.
That's what I meant.
No, okay, yes, but to, at least get something from the show, like Breaking Bad, you have to at least, at some level, be like, okay, Walt's doing this because of X, Y, and Z, right?
Right, there's that intrigue that you still need. It might not be an enjoyment, per se, but you're still involved in actively watching or listening or playing whatever source media that is.
With Dark Souls, and this is how I do all my first playthroughs of Dark Souls games, is
the big bunk stick.
You just fucking play it, right?
Right.
Now, obviously, there's audio-visual things that cue you into certain things, but in terms of analyzing why things are the way they are, the game doesn't give you that info, like you said. But so long as you have your big bonk stick, you could get the enjoyment out of the game.
Yeah.
Now, to get that extra little bit, then yes, you do need to kind of sit down and be like, okay, why and how? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But so long as the big bonk stick is there,
right, you
can get something out of the experience.
You see, with that, I think it has to do with the amount of audience and media attention, too.
That's
because
true.
We can announce, this is kind of taking it back a little bit, but with something like Marvel, so many people have seen it that you have so much conversation and people can talk about it with each other. Mm-hmm. There, something I actually think horrible happened to me, and it's not physical,
but something traumatic.
I used to read a lot of books, and at a certain point, I realized that the books I was reading, nobody else read, and it made me feel alone and isolated, so I stopped reading. Because I couldn't talk about these books with anybody I knew. That, to me, that's just a personal experience, but there are a lot of books that there are no analysis of, or very little, and the deeper and more individual the niche subject is, especially if it doesn't have a very strong fan base, because there are, niche things that 8,000 people might really, 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 really like.
Yes.
And then those 8,000 people are have a super strong community. That's amazing. I'm part of a LARP community, and we want to talk about these things, even though probably in total there's 900 of us. Kind of not all at once, but collectively
there have been Michigan or
there's 900 people on the Facebook group.
Oh, okay.
Or something like that, right? But when it comes to much more individual topics of things, a lot of the time, those things are filled by people that might not necessarily need to talk about them with other people because they've never had the ability to do that. With books in particular, I say that. You have the experience, and now this is a little bit skewed, but you told me that you have the experience of you don't have any friends that talk about Dune with you. Now, I started talking about it recently.
Yes.
Now, Dune is one of the most popular books, at least science fiction books of all time.
Yes.
And that...
Well, the first one is that.
The first one. And that is something that... And there's a new movie coming out soon.
Oh, yes. That's going to reignite a lot of... See, well, that's the thing. Now that there's this big budget movie, highly marketed movie coming out, there is going to be a lot more avenues for discussion
and conversation because people are going to go back and read the book. Now, on the other hand, I have only gotten through 3 chapters of it. Silas referred to me one of the oldest sci-fi books of all time a long time ago, and I have actually 2 copies of each somehow now because I think I kept buying and losing them and then found the other ones. But the book Hyperion. And Hyperion is referenced in all sorts of sci-fi things. In StarCraft, there's a ship called Hyperion, which is named... It's actually called the Hyperion 3, and it's nicknamed after the book. But I don't actually hear anybody talking about Hyperion. I don't see this. It doesn't come up in my... Even though I watch a lot of stuff about sci-fi, it doesn't come up in my YouTube recommended list. There's nothing like that.
And Hyperion also involves multiple different types or tropes of characters coming together, and then you get an individual story about every single person, and of the main characters, I should say. And I really like that, and then, it ties it all together, too. It's a really great book, and I recommend it.
On the flip side...
Well, actually, before you move on to that, what I was going to say, because you bring it up, it's interesting that it can be harder to start an analysis of things that have little conversation. Let me use Dark Souls as an example, right? Because that game, you have to sort of piece things together. If you have a strong community being like, hey, look at what this item description says, and hey, look at what this little environment thing might say, right?
You have to do less legwork.
Yes, to put together an analysis. So in a way, it's easier to get the ball rolling if the ball was already kind of being pushed along. And then you got someone like Vatty Video pushing it all the way to get as big as Dark Souls analyses. But with Hyperion,
yes,
because you don't really have much avenues of conversation, it's harder to I mean, you can, of course.
Hey, add us if anybody knows anything about that. That'd be fun.
Let us know in the comments below if you actually really like that series.
Yeah, but you were saying, sorry.
No, that was just, it's just it might be harder to start an analysis, an in-depth analysis of Hyperion if you don't have people to bounce ideas off of.
On the flip side, or not the flip side, but in conjunction with this, you have the effect of just because something is big, like a big movie or a bbig show, doesn't mean that everybody has actually gone and read the source material, and I find that particularly prevalent with Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones.
Because I read all the books and didn't watch the show, so I would be able to talk to people about things up to a certain point, and then it all changed, and then I wasn't able to talk with people about it because the source material and the media started to very drastically differ. But out of all the people that I know that have watch the show, there are very few people that I know that have actually read the novels. Some family friends of ours actually pushed me to reading the novels a long time ago, and they were much older than I was. I was 15 at the time. I read all of them, and they were in their 30s. Late 30s, or mid-30s. So that was, there's an age gap difference too with certain things.
So basically what we're saying is that popularity determines analysis level, and it seems like there's kind of a inverse bell curve with how stories portrayed versus how much analysis it garners. So, Dark Souls, for example, portrays very little story in and of itself. You have to dig for it. You have to do the legwork. A lot of analysis, right? And then you go down to, okay, well, you get the bare minimum of analysis of story. You get the driving points. Super Mario Bros, right? You don't have a lot of lore. You get the general gist of it. Not a lot of analysis. Even though there is a bunch of analysis on Super Mario and speculations and conspiracies.
Yeah, it's mostly
what could.
Basically fan fiction.
Right.
It's basically fan fiction because people have a niche interest and they want to continuously
Right.
add to that
So
because
that's-
they're obsessed with
So
it.
that's at the moderate level. That's at the very bottom of the bell curve. You go back up to where there's a lot of material, comic book heroes, story like Greek mythology story, like tropes that are pretty common throughout human history. Get a lot of analysis, right? And I feel like there's that inverse bell curve that happens with these things. And I guess, what we really can't say is that any caliber, or a specific caliber, shouldn't be analyzed. We can't say that.
Yeah, I think that's the conclusion we've actually been driving towards.
Every caliber can be analyzed, and the amount of analysis that goes into it depends on
How popular it is,
how well it's sourced.
as well as how dedicated the fan base is. Popularity, dedication of the fan base,
Novelty, newness of it.
novelty, and availability
Yes.
are the factors when it comes down to how much analysis something does get and what caliber of media is analyzed. And with that, I actually think that with that, if you were to extrapolate our question and turn it into, it is still the question. More niche things probably need to be analyzed more, simply because people don't know about them.
Yeah, it
But
requires
larger
that.
things are going to be naturally analyzed by the media and by people, and so you don't need to have any push towards that. But if I say should, as in like the German should, like you should do that, then I actually do think that niche media needs to be analyzed more, so then there can be more conversations about things.
Yeah.
But that's just my opinion.
Like I said, it always depends on what angle of attack you want to take. And that's part of why I do actually agree that perhaps there really is, every caliber of media can be analyzed. If I were to watch Barney's Happy Dappy special, obviously I'm not going to be talking about the deep struggles that Barney had growing
those
up as a
friends.
lone dinosaur in
Lone
a
purple
human
dinosaur.
world. The lone survivor of his species. Because that doesn't exist, I think.
No, I'm sure, you know what? I'm sure it does. I'm going to
But-
say that now. You could probably find that. You could probably find an analysis on most anything that's portrayed here in media. And that's because...
But that's more like fan fiction,
right,
basically.
fan fiction, or someone's bored and wants to troll.
So I might do that. But I wouldn't take it from that angle, right? But I might be like, okay, let's look at the shot composition of Barney's Happy Dappy Day, or the framing. Well, that's the same shit. The shot composition, color composition, cut, the way they cut it, editing. You can take it from that angle.
Yeah.
I still don't think that would be that interesting.
No.
But you could take it from that angle, and you could
Absolutely.
have some sort of analysis.
Oh, very nice. I think that we kind of wrapped this up pretty well.
Yeah.
Well, I only want to bring one other thing up,
One last thing?
Yes, go
because,
for it.
and it's adjacent to what we're talking about, but Christian and I were talking about this before we started. We are truly a decadent society. Truly a decadent society. Where not only do we create entertainment for the sake of escapism, not to necessarily inspire, not necessarily to convey some sort of
Cultural or moral
or practical,
practical value
yes,
or virtue.
solely for escapism. Not only do we do that, we also feel the need to analyze even the most trite media.
Very.
And now we have us, who are analyzing, people analyzing the escapist trite media.
And hopefully this cycle continues, and that we will have somebody who analyzes us and starts YouTube drama with us about this, saying that we're wrong.
Oh,
because
my
in that
goodness.
capacity, more people will like and subscribe our videos. Also ring the
Comment.
bell.
Yep, ring the little
Yeah.
belly bell.
We're society so steeped in escapism that we have such a phrase like standard sci-fi universe.
Yeah.
The fuck is a standard sci-fi universe? It doesn't exist. But we found a way to standardize it.
We have.
And we have found a way to standardize what in all contexts is modern poetry and modern aesthetics. And I mean aesthetics as in like the philosophy.
Silicon Valleyization?
No,
like something else.
The philosophy that is known as aesthetics.
Yeah, no, we definitely just did exactly what we were talking about.
And who am I to judge people? I have a degree in screen studies.
I mean, if anything, you do deserve to judge people because of that. If
Well,
anything,
I'm the one
it's
who
Christian and I who don't deserve.
I pay tens of thousands of dollars to get a degree in talking about media. Am I not one of
studies
these?
and
Journalism.
there's a practical element to it. Journalism is supposed to be practical.
Supposed to be. At least. I needed to say that because it's been on my mind. And I don't want the irony to get lost on people.
No, yeah, we definitely now realize, and have kind of always realized the irony of what we were discussing today, which is analyzing the analyses of other people and other medias, I should say, from other people. But, like Christian said, like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, put us on your Instagram, TikTok ripoff page thing, whatever they're doing. Put us on OnlyFans.
Give us a shout out on your OnlyFans and your Instagram.
If you still, if you have a LinkedIn, share us there. Let us know. And until next time, this is Silas.
This is Raouf.
And this is Christian.
And this is the Graeyzone. Thanks for joining us.
Goodbye.